So today we are going to be talking about what are your chains. It is evident that anxiety is part of the chains that hold me back because Dan was right. I was locked in a room and I was praying. It hasn't gotten any easier yet. Maybe one day it will. I just continue to be obedient to both Steve and to God. Steve tells me to do something, I do it, at least most of the time. But yeah, what are your chains? This is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've Celebrate Recovery started 7 years ago, June, and I am here today on this stage because of it. I'm not going to talk about, the specifics of Celebrate Recovery because it's not what this message is about. But it is evident in all of our lives that we have chains that hold us back. We have chains that are keeping us from doing what God has called us to do. And there are different types of chains, and there are different situations in our lives. There are relationships that are holding us back. There are addictions. There are habits. There are all the things that are not meant for us to carry with us, but yet we continue to hold on to them. And so we're going to kind of talk about those things and how they became in our lives and how we can get rid of them. And so we're going to start with Philippians 1, chapters 12 through 19. If you have your Bibles, carry them out. If you got your phone with you, hopefully you have a Bible app on there. You can read along with me. So I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and that everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. Everybody say, in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Everybody say, without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry and others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing, everybody say the important thing, is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice, yes, and I will continue to rejoice. For I know that through our prayers and God's provision, that the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me, will turn out for my deliverance. So we're going to go back to that important thing here in a little bit, but we're going to kind of focus on the chains first in our life. So what are your chains keeping you from? Anxiety. It keeps me from being relaxed up here on stage. It could be anything in your life. It could be an addiction. It could be Coke. It could be Netflix. This last week, it was shown to me that I'm spending too much time on Netflix. I've kind of used that over the past year to isolate myself from going out and doing the things that, I don't want to do, but it has become apparent that I'm spending too much time on it. So that's a chain that's keeping me from that. So what I started doing is, in between episodes, because I'm still going to watch Netflix, I keep my Bible on the little end table next to the couch. And so in between episodes, I would just randomly flip through the Bible, and then I would read whatever it was that God wanted me to read. And it wasn't always the same thing, and it wasn't always the same message, because God doesn't want me to read the same thing over and over again. And it is helping me to explore the different parts of the Bible. And I'll say I've only been doing it for a week, and it has been abundantly clear that I need to read my Bible more. Because the feelings that I've had over the past week and the change that has happened in my habits has been chained, or the chains have been broken because of that. Reading the Bible. Taking the time that I wasn't taking before to read the Bible. So when I asked God to reveal those things to me, He did. He showed me what it was. And I can tell you right now, Netflix wasn't on my list of chains. I've got a lot of them. I've broken a lot of chains. Netflix wasn't anywhere on my radar. But that's what God does. He reveals the things inside of us that we need to see that we can't see. Because we're focused on what it is that we're just wanting to continue on, and especially if it's something that's important to us, going back to the important thing, we're not going to want to take that out of our life. So that's why we have to rely on God. We have to rely on prayer in order for our lives to be revealed to us and where our weaknesses are. So as we continue to move through what the chains are, we often hear the term breaking chains in the Christian community. And a lot of times people don't understand what that is or how that's possible or why they still have a chain that hasn't been broken, why it still exists in our life. God breaks chains. That's what he does. There's numerous songs about it. There's numerous testimonies that have been written about it. You can ask anybody who's been a Christian long enough. They will be able to tell you at least one chain that has been in their life that no longer exists because of the power of prayer and worship. So we continue to ask for these to be revealed to us. There are chains in our life that didn't just show up. The devil didn't come to us with a chain. The devil comes to us with a choice. And it begins with that choice. And so when we start to make a choice, there are 6 signs that I've seen that will tell us whether that choice is a bad choice. If we are avoiding the input from people that you respect, if you've got a choice that you're trying to make and you don't talk to your pastor, you don't talk to your accountability group, the people from your church, if you don't bring that up to anybody's attention, it's probably a bad idea. If you don't consult God first, it's probably a bad idea. If you're trying to hide that, because that's what that is. If you don't pray on it, if you make a conscious decision not to bring it to God, you're hiding it. Little do you know, you can't hide anything from God. So what's the point? That's a sign of a bad choice. If you don't pray on it, that's a bad choice. If it doesn't grow you spiritually. So this right here stuck out to me because Netflix, right? It's not bad. It's not something that I would see as being bad. But what am I watching on Netflix? I've been watching Vikings. Vikings is not a Christian show. That was revealed to me. They're actually going out of their way to kill Christians. Now, am I going to go out of my way and kill Christians? No. But it doesn't grow me spiritually. It doesn't grow my faith in a way that brings me closer to God. So that's probably something that I should cut out. Does it undermine your integrity? This is one that was revealed to me this week. I had spoken to my boss about taking another part-time job, and this part-time job was something that I prayed for. I prayed for it on a Monday, and it was shown to me on Thursday, this wonderful opportunity that I thought was going to be exactly what I needed in my life. It was going to be part-time, after hours. I was going to be able to do it from home, so I was still going to be able to do it. But then God started to reveal to me, because I did pray on it after the fact. I didn't just say, yep, I'm going to take that job. I was no longer going to be able to do youth on Wednesday nights. I was no longer going to be able to lead a step study on Tuesday nights. And I was going to take time away from me and my children spending that quality time. That is not something that I need in my life. So God was like, yeah, no, this is not something you need to do. And so what did I do? I prayed even more on it. I prayed and brought it to God. I was like, okay, if this isn't it, what does it need to be? And so I prayed for overtime. Well, I'm sorry, those of you that were affected, because I prayed for overtime and I do IT, and then the very next day is when the IT outage happened. I went to bed at 11 o'clock on Thursday night, which is early for me. First phone call came in at 12:05. At 12:05, I started to work on trying to figure out what it was, and that was before anybody knew what it was. I then went into work at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I spent the next 16 hours at work. And so I got the overtime that I prayed for. Be specific with your prayers. This is one of those moments where next time I'm going to be like, can I get some overtime during daylight hours when I don't have my children? And let's work with this a little bit. But that's what it was. I continued to bring it to God because I am aware I make bad choices in my life. There are things that I choose that seem irrelevant at the time, but they end up leading to temptation. Going back to why I choose to be on Netflix at my house. I live in a log cabin in the middle of the woods. I try to isolate from everything because I have a tendency to get myself into situations that could lead to temptation. So I choose to remove myself from things that would lead to temptation. So if you're choosing to put yourself in a situation that could lead to temptation, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it is that big, bad, evil sin that's out there, but it could lead to something that keeps you from growing your spiritual faith. So those are 6 signs that you're making a bad decision. If you recognize any of those in your life when you are deciding on doing something, I encourage you to bring that choice to God. Let Him reveal what the correct decision needs to be. Because sometimes through our lives, through our eyes, we see it as a good deal. We see it as an answered prayer. But that temporary part-time job was going to be a temptation and was going to lead me away from the important things in my life. God revealed it. So, everything begins with a choice, right? What happens when we continue to make that choice over and over again? That choice becomes a habit. And that habit becomes a part of who you are. It becomes something that you don't necessarily become conscious with. You choose to do it over and over again. You stop by the store on the way to work every day, the same store, pick up the same 20-ounce Sun Drop. You pick up the same pack of donuts. That's what I did for a long time. That was a habit that was in my life. That was an unhealthy habit that I had in my life. I had to cut that out. We've got plenty of habits that take over, and we've got plenty of habits that we don't see as being bad for us. But there are things that we don't see necessarily all the time that we do, and we do it every day, and it becomes automatic in our life. You know, when you don't even think about it anymore, when you no longer make a choice on whether or not you're going to do something, that is when it becomes automatic in our life, and that is when it takes over part of who you are. You know, there are things that I don't know what's in your life. When you're sitting here and you're listening to words that I'm speaking, I hope that you're sitting there and there are things that are popping up in your head because you're recognizing and God is revealing that to you today while you're sitting here. There are behaviors that have become automatic in your life that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't have that in your life. But you don't know it yet. I encourage you once again, bring it to the Lord. Let those automatic behaviors be changed in your life. When we have the automatic behaviors and we have it in a public way, if you work in construction, if you work in any situation where cussing is part of it. I was infantry for 6 years. It was automatic to just cuss. It wasn't a habit. It wasn't a choice. You know, I started from a younger age. A lot of the choices that we make begin when we're in high school, begin when we're in elementary school. You know, I spoke to the youth about this on Wednesday night. There are decisions, singular decisions that I made in the 8th grade that have had disastrous consequences throughout my life. That I can lead and show exactly in the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon how that cigarette in the back of my brother's LeBaron in 8th grade, you know, led to a lot of the addictions that I ended up struggling with. You know, there are decisions that we make today. I know some of you are older, but then there are decisions that are made that have disastrous consequences down the road. You know, I love to shoot long distance. I love the ability to just hit a target, you know, hundreds of yards away. And so there's a 600-yard range down in Talladega, and I went there for a 3-gun competition. I brought a scope that was set up for 200, 400 yards. I brought a rifle that was not set up for long distance. It's set up for more short distance. And the 3-gun competition ended up being canceled. And so I was like, well, while I'm down here, I'm going to go ahead and go to the 600-yard range, and I'm just going to play around a little bit. I'm going to take some shots. It wasn't a busy day at the range, so I was able to stay there all day. So you have to gradually shoot. You have to start at 50, go to 100, go to 300 before you can even get out to the 600-yard range. When you make those shots, when you're shooting, it's easy to shoot and hit the target when you're at the shorter distances. But when you have that 600-yard range and you're not set up for it, it's a lot harder to keep a tight group at 600-yard range. I was having to shoot at a target that was like this big, but I'm having to aim 3 feet higher because that's where I had to hit. That's where I had to aim in order to hit my target. And at 600 yards, you make the slightest little change, and you make a big difference. And it just goes like that on and on. So when we're younger, when we're sitting here making decisions, I like to consider myself young. I'm 40 years old. In the grand scheme of things, I hope I'm only halfway there. But when we make these decisions, youth especially, when you make these at this time in your life, it is going to make a huge difference the further down the road you go. That is going to be something that is either going to be positive or negative depending on the choice that you make. Left or right, micro adjustments now will make massive impact changes down the road. I need everybody to focus on that. The little thing that you think is just an insignificant choice today could be disastrous down the road, or it can be your saving grace, whatever it may be. When we continue to do that, it becomes our identity. When we have the automatic behaviors, when we have the habits, when we have all these choices that we are making, it becomes our identity. For the longest time in my life, anger was part of my identity. I've been going to anger management for 17 years now in one form or another because I started at a young age. I was a lot smaller. I graduated high school 5'5", 135 pounds. When you are in school and you are that small, bullying happens. So I decided I was going to take that and become angry. I found power in that anger. I saw the respect that people gave me because I was angry, and I learned that I could fight. I learned from a young age that I could do that, and so it became part of my identity. I no longer made the choice. It was my go-to reaction. My favorite emotion was anger, and that all started from a choice that I had made, which turned into a habit, which turned into an automatic behavior, which then became my identity, and through that identity, it became second nature. People saw that. When they saw me, they saw, oh, he's an angry person. And I was proud of that. Once again, like I said, I was infantry, so they kind of encouraged that behavior, which just doubled down on the negative that created in my life. When we have these chains that have gone through this process and have become part of who we are, it is so much harder to break. It is so much harder to remove from our lives. It is not something that we can do. In Celebrate Recovery, we always say, like, if I could do it on my own, I would have already. There are chains that exist in our life that we do not have the ability to break. It is impossible, not only because we don't recognize them as a chain, but because we have become that chain. It has become who we are. We cannot remove it because then we see it as removing a piece of ourselves. And that's why we have to rely on God. We have to rely on His supreme power to be able to come into our lives, reveal it, and break it. This is something that is difficult. This is something that why we have Celebrate Recovery. And I know a lot of people, I say these words, a lot of people have a negative connotation when I say Celebrate Recovery. People automatically assume that it is druggies and there's alcoholics and there are spousal abusers or whatever it may be. Like I said, I've been going to Celebrate Recovery for 7 years. I can tell you a majority of the people that I deal with in Celebrate Recovery are not there for drugs and alcohol. Codependency. There are things, that negative consequences that come into our life from being dependent on somebody else. If you are relying on somebody else for happiness, that is being a codependent. That is a chain that exists in your life. And you can't live and sustain a life that is dependent upon others for happiness or joy. You can rely on God, but a lot of times we don't do that because, once again, you don't see it. But these are the ways that God uses situations and, I'm not going to say Bible studies, but whatever Celebrate Recovery, whatever term you want to use for it, you know, it opens up your eyes, hearing somebody up there and talk. I heard my mom's testimony for the first time, and I felt alone in what my chains were for the longest time, and I felt like it was my fault and I was the only one dealing with it because I never paid attention or I never listened to somebody else give their testimony. And hearing her testimony, I saw a lot of similarities in her life and her experiences that I saw in mine. And so hearing and being in a situation where I can hear how people have come through their chains, revealed to me that it was possible, revealed to me that through God, those chains can no longer exist in my life. So going back to the avoiding input from other people, if you bring something up to somebody else, you may just be going to them to complain. Complaining could be a chain in your life. Are you the complainer at work? Are you the negative Nancy that are going to be? But that using that complaint to the correct person at the correct time they can give you just a snippet, their elevator speech of how God has changed and broken the chains in their life. That's why we need to go to other people. That's why we need to have the fellowship with other like-minded Christians in our life. There are good chains in our life. There are chains that can exist to protect us. I'm a dog guy. I love dogs. I don't put my dogs on chains very often. We live on a farm. I am blessed to be able to have my dogs roam free, even though my mom has only lived out there for a couple of days now, and she already knows that my dogs are going to be barking outside your house at 3 o'clock in the morning because they're out chasing deer. But in order to protect us and to protect dogs, we put a dog on a leash when we go out in public. I take my dog on hikes. We go hiking and we go all over the place. I can't let my dog roam free because he will get into trouble. He will go get into a situation. He'll get on a trail and he will just chase that trail until he can no longer find it anymore, and then he becomes lost. I love my dog. He's like my little son. He's actually a big son now. He's got a little big. But I have to put a leash on him. I have to put a chain on him to be able to keep him safe, to be able to keep him from getting into the situations that I know as the master that he does not need to be in. I know that. He doesn't know that. He's a dumb dog. He doesn't understand that he can go out there and get stolen, can get lost, can get hurt by a mountain lion or wherever it is I'm at. There are dangers that dog does not see. And I'm not calling everybody in here a dog by no means. But when it comes to our intelligence level compared to God, we are ignorant. We do not see what he sees. We don't see the big picture. There are so many things that he protects us from because we are chained to Christ like Paul is. Because we have put our faith in God, that chain protects us. So not all chains are bad. Some chains are good. Making the good choices, the good habits, the good and automatic behaviors. Those are the things that God, using our faith, will use to protect us. There are situations that I know that if I had the spiritual faith and if I was chained to Christ, I would never have gotten in. There's always that question of, why, God? Why did you let me get into this situation? And what he tells me is, I didn't, you did. God gives us the spirit and the ability to make a choice. This thing called free will. When bad things happen, a lot of people will turn and be like, why did you do this, God? Why did you let this happen? Well, he does let us screw up. He lets us get into these things. He lets us get into the situations and get those chains in our life. Because like I said, I've had a lot of broken chains in my life. I have made all the bad choices. I have not always lived in the way that God wanted me to. And when they asked me to be youth pastor, you don't know who you're asking. I've made all the bad decisions. I'm still reeling from the consequences from a lot of those bad decisions. And Steve told me one day, he's like, yeah, that gives you a special ability to speak to the kids today because you speak from experience. There is a wisdom that comes from making bad decisions. I'm not encouraging anybody out there to go make bad decisions to become smarter. I can tell you the pain that comes from some of those decisions is lifelong lasting. And I don't have to explain that to everybody in here. You guys have lived long enough to understand that. But just because we have those things, those chains, that doesn't mean that we're bad. That doesn't mean we can't be used for God's glory. As long as you look at it from a situation and you pray, okay, God, I still have these chains in my life. What lesson am I supposed to be learning from this? What am I supposed to be getting out of this in order to move forward? What is it going to take for me and my behaviors to change in order for this chain to be broken? Once again, my mom, she asked me one time, she's like, okay, well, what have you learned from this? And I said, well, obviously nothing, because I'm continuing to make that same choice. But that's on me. That's not God. You know, I'm still making the wrong choice because I haven't been open to the idea, maybe there is a lesson in this somewhere. Maybe there is an ability for me to see a little chunk of wisdom that I need to pass on to the youth for the next generation. So God can use those in our lives to be able to make better choices down the road. Give other people the wisdom that they need to not make the same choice. I spoke to the youth about vaping the other day. This is one of those situations where, because of my actions to deep down darken the road, that way past in the day, I vape today. It is harder to quit vaping than cigarettes. I have tried multiple times. I have even given it to God, but then it become weak in times of, like, my kids. I love my kids. I quit my goal was to be quit by 4th of July. Memorial Day weekend, I quit vaping, and it lasted for about 2 weeks. I got my kids, and there was one Saturday morning we were supposed to be going out, and they just weren't listening. They weren't doing anything that I was asking them to do, and my anger that is still part of my life led me to making a decision to stopping by a gas station and buying a vape. And then ever since that day, I've continued to vape. So it's still something that I'm struggling with in my life, but it's still something that I want to give to God, and I want Him to remove it out of my life. But that stranglehold that it has on me can be used. I speak to the youth about it and be like, look, don't make the same problem, the same choices that I made. Listen to the words coming out of my mouth. That is going to have a hold on you. Give it to God now, before you start, before it becomes a physical addiction. Give it to God. Let Him take that from you. Oh, where was I? Sometimes I get a little sidetracked. Oh, the page turn. No. So, yeah, we were talking about new habits, new automatic behaviors. You know, when we are chained to Christ, that's what makes it easier. And when I say chained to Christ, I don't mean chained to religion. A lot of times, especially in the South, I know it's a hard thing to talk about. A lot of times we get chained to a religion, a law that exists inside of that church. And then not only do we hold it against somebody, but we may cut somebody out of our life because they're breaking the law that is the church. You know, I do believe in the new covenant. I do believe in God and sending His Son on this earth to die for our sins. And because of that, we can be forgiven of our sins. So a lot of times people in the South will not do that. They will just be like, oh no, I'm going to shun that person. I'm going to cut that person, kick them out of the church. I've heard countless stories of people in certain denominations. I'm not going to call them out. But certain denominations will hold you accountable to the point where you are no longer allowed to be in that church congregation anymore. What does that say? What is the good of being chained to a religion that shuns people, that removes people from hearing God and from possibly shunning them away from Christ? I was kicked out of youth group when I was 16 years old. That shunned me, that turned me away. My heart was hardened because of that. So when you're chained to religion and you have that mentality of you sin, therefore you don't need to be here, I would argue against that. Those are the exact people that need to be in church. Those are the people that need to be in these empty seats in here. So when we go out into the world and we carry that chain that we have holding on to that is to religion and not to Christ, how are you acting? How are you interacting with people out in the community? How do they see you? The term Bible thumper, it kind of has a negative connotation to people outside of the church. Inside of the church, it should be a good thing in knowing that they know the Bible. Ike Nelson is a Bible thumper. That man knows the Bible from front to back. That's a good thing. But I can promise you that Ike Nelson is not going out into the community and he is not using that Bible to hurt people. He is not using that Bible to show how bad somebody is. What the negative thing that is in their life, the chain that is holding that person, he's not using it as a weapon against people that need to hear it. He's using it to encourage him. He's using his chain to Christ in order to reach those people. I like to think that I am out there in the community and I am acting in a way. Most days, there are certain days, I'm not going to lie, Friday, I almost lost my Christian at work. You know, people come to you at 4 p.m. and you've been there since 2 and up since 12. The world starts to take over, and that hunger that I had a chicken biscuit and a handful of Cheez-Its all day long, 2 bottles of water. I get hangry. And so when the wrong person or even the right person asks the wrong question, you know, a lot of times, like I said, it's my go-to feeling. But if I'm chained to my feelings, the enemy is going to use that. The enemy is going to give me opportunities to experience anger. So like that is another thing where if I was chained to Christ and focused on that, going back to the important thing that Paul's talking about, what is the important thing in your life? Is it your feelings? Because if it is, you're going to be wishy-washy. You're going to go with the flow, as they say. You're going to be put in situations that are going to make you experience different feelings. And that's how you're going to act, is depending on the situation you're in. Instead of being grounded in life and chained to Christ like we're meant to be, like we're called to be, we're going to be out there and we're going to act like that. And then that's going to be part of your identity when people think of you. Oh, man, don't go to him. It's 11 o'clock. He hasn't eaten yet. Don't go to him yet. You know, that's not how I want to be seen. But like that's a lot of us. We allow ourselves to be influenced not by the Holy Spirit, but by what's happening in our surroundings. I want everybody to spend some time and just evaluate from an objective standpoint, from a lens focused on Christ, using the Bible. Evaluate how you act. Evaluate how you're going through life. Look at your actions. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're doing and why you're doing it. I want you to see the chains that may not be, you know, we all see the anchors hanging off of the boats. You know, it's this giant, massive chain that is just awe-inspiring in how big it is. That's not what it is always in our life. A lot of times we have this small chain that is holding us back, keeping us from being able to do what our calling is. I promise you, everybody in this room has a calling. Everybody in this room, in this community, has a calling placed on them from Christ. I'm cursed with a calling to be up here. Not everybody's called to be in the ministry. Your calling may be just going out there and providing food for a food pantry, or doing something that is just to help your neighbor in the time of need. You may have a listening ear that you just need to be able to be there and listen to somebody that needs to speak what's laying it is on their heart. I encourage everybody to go out and just change your habits. Change your choices, how you're making those choices. If you're using those 6 things to make a decision, or if you're not using the 6 things that you should be doing to make a decision, go out and change. Make a choice today. Change how you do that. Change how you will be seen in the community. I get approached at times when I see people that I haven't seen for 10 and 15 years. They're like, man, you're just not the same person you were. You're right. You're right. Because I'm making different choices. I'm making a difference in my life. I'm allowing God in my heart. And then in that action, He is changing me from the inside out. And I encourage you, I tell them, like, look, the same thing that happened to me, brought me from the darkness into the light, can happen to you. It can give you the ability, the courage, the strength, to be able to have that conversation. Because having a conversation with somebody who's not a Christian is hard. But we are called, every one of us, to spread the gospel. We are called, every one of us, to go out and spread the good news that is Jesus Christ. If you are afraid, if you do not think you can do it, leave it to God. Submit it to God. Pray for God to give you an opportunity to grow that ability to do it. I'm still doing it today. Like I said, I pray before I come up here. I pray the day, the night, the hour, the minute before I come up here, because I still feel like I can't do it. Because there are times where I can't. But I promise you, anything that I need to do to glorify God, God gives me everything I need to make that happen. I want everybody this week to just go out, spend the afternoon contemplating on what it is in your life that you need to change. I encourage everybody to just sit down in peace and just ask God, come into my life, reveal it to me. I challenge everybody in here to speak to one person a day. Let's just start with one person this week that you know needs to hear it. That you know that they just aren't where they need to be. That they are part of those that are making the bad decisions because they're hiding it. Because they're not wanting to do the good thing. Speak to them. If you don't have the words, if you don't know what needs to be said, ask God to give it to you. He'll give it to you. He will show you the way. And I promise you, He's not going to leave you by yourself. He's not going to leave you there in that conversation without being able to finish it exactly the way He designed it to be. So everybody this week, once again, I'm thankful that everybody was here. Thank you for listening to me. I'm trying to work on my closings. I told Steve I would. Sometimes I feel like Forrest Gump, and I'm just up here like, and that's all I have to say about that. You know. But I want to leave you guys with the encouragement that you are not alone. That you are watched over. That God has His leash on you. And as long as you allow Him, He will guide you down the path. Protect you from what you need to be protected from. Just continue to just give your faith to Him and continue to give your heart to Him. And I promise everything will end up exactly the way He needs it to be. I hope you guys have enjoyed today. As Steve says, are you glad you came to church today? You know, I am. I'm glad it's over. But I will be in the back like Steve. I hope that everybody in here today has gotten something out of this, and I hope that you hand that off to somebody else as you move through this week. God bless you, and I'm so thankful you were here today.